pleased to welcome you this evening. Tom Grassi, our other co-chair, is teaching and cannot be with you tonight. One of our goals at T&I is to elevate the conversation about the role of architecture and design excellence on transportation infrastructure projects, especially in the public realm. As the year ends, AIA New York's 2024 theme is belonging and beyond. So art improves our physical and social emotional health in our communities. This collective experience improves our communities and sense of place. So what better way to do this than partner with a world-class art program, MTA's Arts and Design, right? You'll hear more about this tonight. So let me introduce you to Eve Michel, formerly Chief Architect at MTA Capital Construction. Well, it's now Construction and Development. She now teaches at Columbia and is working on our very own working as our very own T&I program director. Tonight she will moderate this excellent panel with my fellow MTA colleagues. So over to you, Eve.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shirley. This is being brought to you on behalf of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And tonight we really have a great program for you. We're very excited about this. You're going to learn about the MTA Art and Design program, but also about the people who make it possible. And I'm going to start by first introducing some of our panelists. Not going to be long introductions because they really need no introduction. But starting with Sandra Bloodworth. Sandra is the former director of MTA Arts and Design, which of course is an award-winning public art program, affectionately known as New York's Underground Art Museum. And for those of you who have visited many of the pieces, I'm sure you'll agree. And then, as many of you know, or I hope some of you know, just last week, Sandra was the recipient of a very prestigious award from the Municipal Art Society. It is the annual Jacqueline Onassis Award. I was thrilled to be there. I was there with Cheryl and Linda to see her feted along with Patti Smith and Yoko Ono. So. And of course, we're particularly pleased about that because, I mean, that's an amazing company to be in, but what I think is incredible is that MAS is recognizing what the arts and program is doing for New York City and what Sandra did to promote that. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that tonight. We're also joined by Cheryl Hageman, and she is Deputy Director of MTA's Arts and Design. She's also responsible for commissioning new projects, for maintaining the permanent art collection throughout the entire MTA system. And of course, with Sandra, she wrote this fabulous book that we're going to hear about tonight. Linda Tonn is our Chief Architect at MTA C&D. Yay, Linda. Linda has been part of so many of these amazing collaborations between art and architecture, and currently Linda has 2 jobs at MTA. In addition to her role as Chief Architect, she's also responsible for all the design work in the station business unit and technical staff, including the architects and all of the engineers, which is not an easy task, as you can imagine. So in 2016, Linda and Sandra co-led a major design initiative to establish a new vision to bring aging transit stations into the 21st century. So that's what you're going to be hearing about tonight. Before I turn it over, well, I'm going to tell you a couple other things, but MTA, thank you for joining here. I know we have a lot of people in the audience. I do have a question. Do we have some people from Columbia University program? All right, because that's we're teaching in the Columbia program, and so the idea of arts and design is something that we very much want to impart to our students there. Let's see. To get to the next slide. I might need help getting to, it's the clicker, which is, oh, there it is. Okay, this is a good thing to know about. All right, so for those of you who are part of the architectural community, we do offer continuing education credits, learning units. So tonight you're going to learn a lot of great stuff. And it's a particularly good time of year because by the end of the year, you all need your learning units. But what we're going to talk about tonight is you're going to learn about the MTA Arts and Design program. We're going to talk about the customer experience and just about how art makes everything better, makes everything richer. We're also going to talk about the synergy between art and architecture and how all this works from both the practical as well as the creative perspective. And we're going to discuss art, community, and that amazing interaction. The other thing, too, is we're also going to single-handedly solve your holiday gift-giving. That's good. You know where this is going. So the book is here for sale. Sandra and Cheryl will be signing after the talk. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl and Sandra. Just very quickly on the format, Cheryl and Sandra are going to do an overview presentation, and then basically Linda and I will ask them questions, we'll open it up to the audience, and then we'll have the book signing.
Let's see if, does this work?
Yep.
This does? Okay, we're ready, right?
Good, go back, so you don't have to go forward.
Oh. This is not the, is this the first one?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. All right. Good evening. Wow, what an audience. Thank you, each and every one, for being here tonight. It's just terrific to have this opportunity to talk to you. Cheryl and I are excited. We're going to share some of the stories with you from Contemporary Art Underground, and then we're going to engage in conversation with Linda and Eve more broadly about the role that art has in the transit system and how it gets there. MTA Arts and Design presents visual and performing arts throughout the MTA system through permanent art and an extensive temporary art program. And these are done to engage our writers. Over the past almost 4 decades, Arts and Design has commissioned more than 400 permanent artworks and gives each station a unique identity. The MTA has one of the largest and most diverse collections of public art in the world. Artists are emerging, mid-career, and well-known, as is the case with this work of Roy Lichtenstein's at Times Square, or Romare Bearden's at Westchester Square in the Bronx. For almost 40 years, the program has carried on the vision of the subway founders using art and design to signal respect and enhance the experience of the customers that we serve. This before and after image offers a striking look at the impact of art and design. This project is from the chapter titled A New Look, which is chapter 6 if you have your book, is one of the more than 100 artworks featured in the book, all completed between 2015 and 2023. Tonight we're going to focus on a selection of those works.
Arts and Design works with architects and the design team to determine the art location and medium in the early stages of the project. The art is integrated into the architecture and intended to remain for the life of the station. Durable materials are a requirement. Mosaic has been a reliable medium since the earliest days of the subway. Glass smalty, seen on the left, offers the advantage of through color and is available in an endless array of shades. Nancy Bloom created detailed color studies that fabricator Stephen Mioto used to translate her drawings into glass mosaics at 28th Street. Material choices and placement of the art help to define the station. The art aids in wayfinding and often impacts the streetscape as well. The artwork is site-specific and considers the location's history and community. The medium of mosaic is most commonly associated with our program, so it may surprise some to learn that we also have more than 100 glass artworks. The MTA system has many above-ground stations, and glass can enhance both the station interior and the exterior. At North White Plains, glass is used in the platform railing. As we'll see shortly in a case study, it's also well suited for a station facade. And it's widely used on platform windscreens at elevated stations, and occasionally it's used in underground stations too. This hand-painted glass artwork by Alex Katz is backed with a white coating that gives the color vibrancy with no need for backlighting. At Grand Central, Jim Hodges' artwork is made of more than 70 colors of hand-blown antique glass, laminated to mirrored glass, then water jet cut into 5,000 unique organic shapes. And metal is another frequently used material. Like mosaic and glass, the book contains a medium focus chapter dedicated to the various art applications for metal. Not surprisingly, it is ideal for fences, railings, and freestanding sculpture. Whatever durable material used, the artist's work is translated by a fabricator, chosen by the artist, and approved by Arts and Design. For the street-level portion of her work, Jean Shin selected Frank Giorgini to produce handmade ceramic tiles that depict the dismantling of the 2nd Avenue L structure.
Through a selection process that engages arts professionals and the community, Arts and Design commissions works that enhance the station and allow the artist's vision to come through. Firely Baez incorporates tropical plants and symbols rooted in her Caribbean culture. The result is a bright and welcoming space. In contrast, Ann Hamilton's artwork at WTC Cortland uses a somber monochromatic palette. Known for her poetic vocabulary in immersive environments, Ann Hamilton is internationally acclaimed for her ability to respond to a site's architecture and social history. Her mosaic weaves words from the preamble of the Declaration of Independence with text from the 1948 UN Declaration of Human Rights. Anne chose Meyer of Munich to construct the work as a field of white marble. It's a material often used for public memorials. Together, the artist and the fabricator conceptualized lifting the letters out of the field. Each of the letters has been water jet cut, then reset and raised from the ground. This tactile quality invites contact and a sensory engagement with the piece that serves as both memorial and a beacon of hope. The artist creates a profound experience that is both meditative and affirming and reminds us of the highest aspirations of the human spirit. Titled Chorus, it expresses the musicality of the words and refers to a choir whose song is carried by the unison of the individual vocalist. We were able to achieve this project because of the many partners we had. At every step of the way, we were met with, yes, we can do that. Anne called it a chorus of yeses, and it was. And some of our partnerships are like that. Linda and I, as Eve mentioned, co-led the initiative under which many of these projects were created. It was because of the teamwork between the architects, the engineers, the lighting designers, and the arts administrators, and many others, that we were able to accomplish so much in such a compressed time frame.
Sarah Z's artwork at 96th Street is an immersive installation. As riders descend into the subway station from street level or rise from the lower platform, the dynamic imagery swirls around them. Sarah chose a very limited color palette. The enormous work contains just 8 shades of blue plus white. Blueprint for Landscape comprises nearly 4,300 unique digitally printed tiles fabricated by Alcalagreas using pigmented ceramic inks. Each of the tiles was labeled to indicate location and orientation. The tiles were clipped to a framing system already installed at the station, and custom-colored vinyl strips fill the joints to provide continuous color across the interior walls. Measuring roughly 14,000 square feet, it is by far the largest artwork in the MTA Arts and Design collection and one of the biggest public artworks in the world. The color combinations vary at each entrance, as does the type of energy depicted. Water and wind surge through the scenes. The mezzanine stretching from 94th to 96th Streets uses only 2 colors of glaze. Set in a sea of deep blue, a whirlwind of white sheets of paper, rendered in a woodblock style, are shown being blown across the expanse. As trains enter and exit the stations, the rush of air from the platform below brings the scene to life.
Building on Grimshaw's design vision, 100-year-old elevated stations in Astoria, Queens, were re-envisioned in a stylish contemporary aesthetic by DiDomenico Partners. Grimshaw's concept design was led by Timur Ahmad, who is now joined MTA at C&D, so you never know what's going to happen out there. This project won an AIA New York State 2019 Excelsior Award for merit. These large-scale structural reconstructions provided an opportunity for art to be fully integrated into the architecture. At Broadway Station, Diane Carr's piece titled Outlook is an imagined landscape connecting the past and present of the community around the station. The artwork is captured in 47 panels of full-height architectural glass integrated into the mezzanine facade. Diane's artwork references the woodlands, wetlands, forests, and meadows that were once dominant in the location. The palette choices for the title Outlook are inspired by colors visible in the storefronts, the restaurants, and the public spaces that are near the station. It was important to Diane that the finished pieces of glass capture the feeling of her oil painting on which they're based. She chose Peter's Glass Studio to realize her vision. Here we see her at Peter's studio making decisions about the opacity of each color. I wasn't going to say their full name, but I will. Glas Mallory. Did I get it? Glas Mallory.
I think it's
Mallory.
Mallory.
Glas
like,
Mallory.
I remember it rhymes with
Glas Mallory.
Valerie.
I think it's very important to pronounce people's names correctly, and so I try, but don't always make it. The process begins with the review of a full-scale print. Peter's glass techniques use silver resist and many layers of hand-painted transparent enamels to build the imagery by hand, as well as airbrushed color application. The imagery was applied to the inner surface of 2 pieces of architectural glass, and then as a final step, they were laminated together for increased safety and durability. Through these varied techniques, Peter was able to create areas of transparency and parts that were more opaque. The end result replicates the variety of brushwork in the original painting and engages writers through subtle changes throughout the day and seasons. The artwork becomes a defining element, helping to establish the new look of this elevated station and fulfill the challenge to breathe new life into 100-year-old stations.
And lastly, we'll look at Nick Cave's Times Square project that graces the cover of the book. Nick Cave entrusted Meyer of Munich to interpret in glass mosaic his sound suits, wearable sculptures often made of hair, fur, raffia, sequins, toys, and twigs. In 2019, major renovations to the Times Square shuttle included the addition of a new entrance below 1 Times Square and a new passage linking Times Square and the Bryant Park stations. The construction provided 3 expansive wall surfaces for what is now the largest mosaic artwork in the Arts and Design collection, totaling more than 4,600 square feet. The 3-part artwork, each one, every one, equal all, has 3 distinct scales and background styles. Each one is installed directly below 1 Times Square building, whose rooftop is home to the famous New Year's Eve ball drop. The sound suits here are shown suspended off the ground or rounded into ball-like forms. Broad stripes extend the full height of the wall to establish a verticality that connects with Times Square above. In the 42nd Street connector, now linking Times Square and Bryant Park and System, The longest section, called Everyone, features oversized sound suits, designed to make the narrow space feel comfortable and inviting. The shifting scale of the more than 24 sound suits here make the space feel bigger than it is and helps to disguise the change in ceiling height. On the opposite wall, there is an echo of the imagery in the color banding. This doubling effect, which you can see on the elevation at the top, was created by the artist working with the architects Di Domenico and partners to further activate the space. At the center of the long passage, a video component is presented on the digital advertising screens, displayed for 3 minutes every quarter hour. In this companion piece, many of the sound suits seen in static form in the nearby mosaic appear activated through performance. Nick wanted the design for Equalall, located at the end of the 42nd Street shuttle platform, to work for those experiencing it at close range or from 100 feet away. The piece is composed of 12 sound suits, shown true to size and with detail that comes close to the original sculptural works. The sound suits are grounded and neatly contained in the space between knee braces and barrel vaults. A background of radiating lines amplify their energies, and sound like waves express an exchange that suggests they are communicating with one another and those who pass by. Many of the sound suits were photographed while being worn by Nick. Seeing the hand of the artist rendered in such detail is a beautiful element of the artwork, but it also serves as a reminder of the many hands involved in the artist's process and all who work to bring these public artworks to life for our riders. Thank you.
Cheryl and I, it's really important to us and to our team that everyone that touches, everyone that has gone into being part of all this wonderful work, these 400 works, that they are acknowledged. That's impossible. But I would like for everyone that first works for any part of the MTA to please stand. I know Matt's here.
Let's turn the lights on.
Yeah,
Because
turn
we're
the
good.
Matt. Yeah, all right. Now, everyone keep standing. There he is, Matt's here. Keep standing. Now, then Lydia's behind from Arts and Design. Now, everyone that has worked for a consultant or touched this program, please stand. Lenny, come on, everybody. Let's see. Masamichi, there they are. Come on. So, thank you all, and please continue to support this program the way you have. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Sandra and Cheryl. What you have done for the program is so impressive. And when I see this presentation and I see all the work that goes into it, and when you see the layering and you start to understand what goes into these pieces, it really is very spectacular. We're going to let you take a breath for a moment. Linda, what do you think?
Absolutely the same, and it's just, I mean, we're professionals. There's a lot of design professionals out in the audience. There was so many decisions made to get to that final project. You know, it just was endless discussions. We were in the field with artists. We were looking at lights and proportions and the best viewing spots. We had to balance pedestrian circulation, you know, confusion, signage, all kinds of things. And it was just so much went into it, even separate from the artists making all their decisions and what they wanted to express in their art, which is fascinating. And also about how much work has been completed in the last 10 years.
Right, right, and that right there is impressive. The book that I'm going to ask Cheryl to talk a little bit about, but the book is from 2015 to 2022. It's a sequel. There's a prequel. So, so the amount of work that has been generated by this group is unbelievable. And I'm also here to tell you that, believe it or not, within the MTA, they don't get the robust support that they really should. And one of the things that Sandra and I have talked a lot about is how you spread that word so that this kind of a program gets the support. But MTA is primarily an engineering organization in terms of the construction. It's primarily an operating organization, really is what it is. But in terms of the construction, it's primarily engineering. So to get the voice of both the architect and the artist out there is something that we're really looking to grow and expand. So let me start off with a question to you, Cheryl. This book is an amazing book. I've had the chance to look at it and really spend time with it. It's got a very interesting organizational structure. You do speak about it in your presentation, but could you elaborate a little bit in how it's organized and what went into the book?
Yes, definitely. I'm very glad that you mentioned that there's a prequel, that there have actually been 2 books written by Sandra, co-authored by Sandra, about the collection, which is now about to turn 40. So there's quite a lot of work that precedes this that's captured in those first 2 books. And I know that our editor for Monacelli, Elizabeth White, is here.
There she is. And Bill Ayers.
Right, and Bill Ayers was the co-author for those first 2 books, and so I think there was sort of, Sandra can speak to how the decision was made to do the book right at that moment in time, but there was, about 100 projects that had been done, many mega projects, as we just talked about, a couple of them, that were not reflected in either of those 2 books. So there was certainly a need for something to catch up. But when we started looking at thinking about whether or not it made sense to sort of replicate that same format, we were thinking about the fact that everybody wants to know how the art is made. Everybody is curious about that. Everyone wants to see photos like this of that part of the process and kind of get that behind the scenes look. So that was something that there wasn't space to do in those earlier books, but really distinguishes this one. There are more than 300 pictures, and the first few chapters of the book are sort of location specific, either a single station or, in the case of Second Avenue Subway, or multiple projects. Though we do have a lot of materials that we work in often, so it did make sense to us to sort of structure the 3 chapters on the 3 mediums that we use most often: mosaic, glass, and metal, and really take readers through that process.
Yeah, and one of the things in terms of how you translate materials, one of my favorite stories is Zenobia Bailey is the artist that's at the number 7 extension, and Zenobia Bailey's medium is crochet, and that's how she works in these enormous mandala type of crochets. And Sandra and Cheryl and their staff translated them into mosaics, and it will come by on the background, and we'll sort of point it out. But it's a beautiful piece, and so can one of you talk about a little bit about that?
Probably hand it off to Cheryl, but I do want to say up front that, one group I didn't talk about are the artists, as far as calling you out. I know Barbara Ellman and Masamichi are here, and those of you that have done projects, without the artist, there's no art, clearly. And then the fabricators. I'm going to hand that off to Cheryl, though. Cheryl's our material guru.
Thank you. And I realized, one thing that I failed to mention is the amount of research that went into making this book. You'd think because there are projects that we live with and look after daily that we would know them inside and out, but we did an extensive amount of research, looking at our archives, our files, but also reaching out to the artists and the fabricators and talking about that process. And it was a lot of emails and a lot of hours on Zoom, but we learned so much that is now documented here and only here in this book. And I think Zenobia's project is an excellent example of that. I mean, there's so many things that went into that particular project that I didn't know. I certainly was familiar with the translation process of her work, digitizing the fiber-based pieces, and then working with Stephen Mioto on those sort of really interesting forms to have the mosaic brought into the dome and the lunettes, I think they're called lunettes, the pieces at the entrances. But one thing I will say that was really interesting to me about that chapter is that she talks about the influence of Nick Cave on her art making process. And we found that multiple times where, yeah, perfect. So there were artists that are really, they're inspiring one another in sort of real time, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, I would just add that the layers that Cheryl is mentioning, you know, are really amazing. I met about a year ago or so Angie Marr, who is a chef, and I found out that she talked about her aunt, Ruby Fu, I believe, in Seattle, who was very, very politically active and all. And so all these years, I mean, a year later, and I was speaking with Zenobia, and Zenobia popped up a slide, and it was a parade in Seattle with all the tremendous costumes, Asian community, Pan-Asian, and she started talking about Ruby Fu and how she had, in Seattle, she created this dramatic parades and presentation, and how much it built on influenced Zenobia. And so here, you find out all these stories, they connect, they weave through, and look, by learning, this was the richness of the book for us, were things that we might never have known.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, talking about the different artists and the different pieces, you know, Sandra, you just received this prestigious award. One of the pieces in the system is actually been designed by Yoko Ono. And so just because it's kind of fresh in our minds and so on, can you say a little bit about what went into that and what you like about that piece? And
I think, you know, for me, I think it's you know, we always say when we're selecting artists, and we have a beautiful process that we'll share with you another time, but it involves community representatives and arts professionals, and the goal is great art that's going to speak to the community. So when I was looking at Yoko's project, when she proposed, you know, things have to reach people in a certain way. And when I moved to New York in 1980, I moved to the Upper West Side, and I was there just a few months when John Lennon was killed. And a week later, on the 14th of December, we all gathered, 100,000 of us, in the southern part of Central Park below the Dakota. And this happened all over the world, people gathered. And then all these years later, here Yoko proposed, you know, through her team, like every other artist, and she proposed these beautiful pieces, if you remember, with Imagine and Peace, and really linking to that place, speaking to that community, speaking to me personally, but speaking to the world in a way, people throughout the world anyway. And it's just such a beautiful example of how the work, what our mission is, and that's the criteria we give artists. Speak to the people who use this place, and that's why it makes sense for the MTA to spend money on art, because it transforms your journey.
so, Linda, you and I have talked a lot about art and architecture and how that relationship plays out, and at MTA, how you actually activate the spaces. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the interaction of art with architecture, particularly in light of some of the new stations that have gone in?
So, well, you know, working with, you know, the arts team, and we start from the very beginning of a project, looking at potential art locations. And of course, it's a great process for us. All of the architects love to do this, and our consultant architects are always so helpful. And we kind of just go through and try to make the most of what we have. We have to be very economical. We try to focus the art where people are going to really enjoy it and see it and get the most out of it. I guess you could see in that Yoko Ono project we did for ESI, the station was very pared down. We removed, we decluttered, we reduced signage, and we really made a clear view of the art in that one. So that's a lot of things that we do and my team participates on. It was really fun. Every process is fun, and it changes and shapes along the way. Absolutely.
And the MTA has done a lot of station upgrades, and that's one of the reasons why so many pieces have come to be. And let me tell you, the team over there is small, and the amount of work that goes into this is incredible. But if you would, Linda, just a little bit more about just the architecture. Like, for instance, with Nick Cave, you actually see the piece integrated.
Yeah, so that was a really fun process with that. There was a lot of space for art. And when the project was well underway, when we started locating the art and figuring out where it would best suit the project. And so you saw images of the figures that were up, the sound suits, and just the figure after figure. And originally that art piece had like a flat top, and we wanted to locate it on that wall. So we were like, what do we do with the knee bracings? And we were concerned about the lighting. We normally don't extend the art up into the arches of the structure, but in that situation, we were like, no, let's put it up there, ignore the knee braces, and it just came out so beautifully. I think it exaggerated the characters and makes, it just really is a great experience when you walk through there. And then also the corridor, the art location was picked for the corridor, but then the space, it's a corridor, and we were very concerned about it becoming deadly, like too long, too narrow. We wished we had some more width. The height was good, but we had communication systems running around. And so D. Domenico and Partners worked with their contractor. They were part of a design build team for that piece of work. And just ideas developed about putting, we didn't have a budget for art on both sides. We wanted to focus it in a very impactful way on one side. We've added video screens, which was a great idea, and our advertising vendor was very happy to do that for us. So then they had this idea of like putting a bright color of tile instead of subway white on the other wall, and it just kind of evolved into the tile just picking up the colors in the sound suits on the opposite side of the wall and having this stripe that just kind of resonated with the art, and it just evolved. Yeah, it was very fun.
Yeah. Sandra, do you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, and Cheryl may too, because Cheryl managed that project. I think, the one thing that gets left out here, Linda, is the architecture that brought these, we co-led this effort. Well, this effort was about bringing these over 100-year-old stations into a contemporary aesthetic. And Linda had the opportunity there, both she had issues of historic preservation to address, but she brought those guidelines with her team into that whole area. So you not only are seeing there the art, you're seeing how it melds with what the system could be if we can get this throughout. And I think that was pretty amazing. Cheryl, she had firsthand management of this, the day-to-day, and Matt, who's here, she might want to add to that.
I think there's very little that I can add to that, but I will just say that the amount of support that we received on that project in particular was like really, really stands out. We couldn't have done it any other way. I mean, there were so many unique concerns and considerations at that location, and while it's one project, it really was 3 different projects because each space was occurring at a different time and had its own issues. But I guess one thing that's impressive to me when I look at that project was it really speaks to the artist's vision and his ability to see into a space that didn't exist and really nail the right scale for that location. And it happens in all three, which is astonishing to me. I mean, that one Times Square wall with the big vertical stripes, and you really, really get that sense of like the rising and falling that connects to the plaza. But that wall is 14 and a half feet, and it doesn't feel big when you're standing next to it. It almost feels kind of, they all kind of feel intimate, even though their scale is anything but. And then at the concourse, you really can walk right up to the one that's in the barrel vaults and have this kind of like interaction. And every single time I walk by there, I see people who've stopped and they're just touching it. And that's kind of one of my favorite things to catch in the stations, is that people really do, as busy as we all are, take that moment and they're so curious, again, at like discovering how these things are made through just through touching it. So it's quite beautiful.
Yeah, so I love to see that our passengers also like stopping and enjoying the art. And it happens when you're out. I was doing some field work, just checking on a recent installation, and at 163rd Street, I think it was shown, we showed that one, right? A little girl started trying to hug one of the figures on the wall, and it was just the sweetest thing. It just made me feel, yes, our customers, passengers appreciate it. Right? So much.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what we're talking about here is the customer experience. And I know Jeff Dugan is in the house, and he and I have talked a lot about how you really develop the customer experience in the built environment. And I think that the art is so much a part of that, and sort of that combination of art and architecture. And also the customer experience is the communities that use it. And so I'd like to ask all three of you, just if you could talk a little bit about the community involvement, what the role is of art, how does it impact the communities? I'll leave the adjectives to you, but Sandra, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think if there's one thing that I feel is a contribution, is sort of this mantra from day one of who we are creating this art for. Not for the New York art world. It was from the beginning for the people who used that place. Fortunately, probably thanks to Elizabeth Murray, the New York art world came to us, but because that's where the people are, and that's where their work can be seen more than anywhere else. So what we would do is it's a procurement, and every panel from day one, that while there was a movement in planning about, excellence in art is for art galleries, and, we should have people together and let them tell you what your art should be. Well, I didn't embrace that philosophy, far from it. I felt that's what you need the artist for, the artist's vision. So create this environment that the artist's vision can come through, but that the artists are fully aware the artist that's going to get selected is going to be on the criteria of whose work, whose proposal is connecting to that place and the people that use it. And that is just we have orientations, it is sort of pounded into the panel in selecting the finalist, and then into selecting the artist that gets it, but in between there's an orientation. And the same, we give a presentation on the community. We give, before we show artists' work, and in depth, which Lydia Bradshaw came up with this many years ago, this idea of doing that, and then that grounds the team into researching the community, and as our responsibility to know the community. And let me tell you, when community represents, the community board comes in there, and you have just shown them a detailed presentation about their community, and we ask them, what did we miss? They are so blown away that we have gone to this effort to know the community. Now, for me, that is community engagement.
Sandra just mentioned this. The selection panel is community representatives are there, and then art professionals are on the panel that are tied to the community.
Right.
So it's amazing. They're familiar with the art in their neighborhood and so forth.
And by giving the respect to the arts professionals that they're going to have the vote, and it's all about respect because then the community is respected. You've just shown them this presentation. And often, not always, they do know the panelists that are arts professionals. They live in the community or they work in a cultural institution or some connection. And a dialogue begins where, you know, once in a while you have someone that comes in that knows what they want from the community. But when they see the process and they see how sincere it is and what the mission is, and the professionals are respectful of their opinions, then that is the key to the art that we've selected. And I'm very proud of that. I wish we could bottle it around the country. Of course, everywhere is not like New York where you can find an arts professional down the street. So, Cheryl, did you want to add anything to that?
I think we can leave it there. Yeah, thank you.
Good. So I think what we'd like to do now is open it up to questions from the audience. And after we've taken a few questions, I am then going to ask each of the panelists what the takeaway is they'd like to leave this audience with. And then we'll get on to book signing. So please. So Mara, are you?
Hi, thank you. Extremely interesting, and the results are amazing. It's like being in an art gallery. Every time you take this away, it's beautiful. I have a question about materials. How much time do artists have, how much time is there to execute work of art? How does that impact the choice of a work of art or the materials that are going to be used? In our times, always the amount of time is always the same in every project. Does it change?
Shall I take that one? That's a great question. The medium has already been decided through arts and design, discussing with the architects and design team what location and medium is appropriate for that station. I mean, we'll sit together, we'll look at the drawings and just understand how the space is going to be used and where it makes sense to put art so that it can have the most impact on that customer experience. And at that point, when we advertise the call, when we put out a call to artists, and we're asking for any artists to submit their interest. They don't have to do a proposal at that time. They just have to express that they're interested to get into that first pool to be considered. We would include the material, although most of our artists, I would say, are doing a public commission for the first time. It's not a requirement that they have worked on a public project, nor is it a requirement that they have ever worked in the material that's been specified. We have an approved list of fabricators, so we really guide them through that process. We know what it's going to take to translate a work of art into, mosaic or glass, and what the technical opportunities will be in that. And we are also confident that we have the time needed to deliver and meet the construction schedule, because the deadlines, for our part of it are as important as all of the other deadlines for that construction schedule. I will say that usually, because we need very exact dimensions, there can sometimes be little issues because sometimes we can't start to fabricate, especially windows, until we have those exact dimensions. So we usually put the art in at the very end of the project, but that also serves us well because it keeps the art protected, and then the construction's done, and there's that kind of exciting moment of reveal. But regarding time, I would say we saw some examples, like Second Avenue Subway, that took years in production and execution. But typically for mosaics, we're very comfortable if we have like 6 months from having our measurements to delivering. and glass can sometimes be even a little bit faster, just depending on the techniques that are used.
I'm a great fan of the Q train, and at my entrance at 83rd and 2nd Avenue, we have Chuck Close mosaics. How did those happen? Is there a story behind how those were chosen and fabricated? Because every time I go into the Q train, I look at them and feel very smug.
It's so funny, when we opened this Second Avenue subway, then one of the top senior, I won't say which one, executives told the story that he came through there, and there was a couple kids, a couple boys were walking, going down to take the train, and they were talking to each other, and one went, "Can you believe there's a effing Chuck Close here in the subway?" And it was, that story sort of went throughout the emails. But Chuck Close went through the same process that I just described a little earlier, exactly the same process. Now, there was one exception, but again, decisions made by a panel of arts professionals with community representation. Almost every other project, we've always insisted that it's original work. And Chuck called on his works that he had done throughout his career. But when you brought all those together in representing all these periods of time and different means, and from the Lou Reed tiles to those amazing Sicily mosaics and his portrait of just, when it all comes together, it's definitely an original work. But he went through the same process. We did have the opportunity to take him, before he created the project, through a tour. And of course, we had to line it up with accessibility, and that was one nail-biting day to be sure we didn't get stuck somewhere. But he did go and look at a lot of different projects, and he was fascinated with the mosaics. And he had said to me many years ago, "I don't like public art, and I don't want to be considered for public art, and I'm not doing public art." And he ended up just absolutely loving to do that project.
I will add, because that project, every single time I see it, it blows my mind. For anyone who has not seen it in person, it is worth a trip, a visit to the 86th Street station, and there are 12 pieces. There are 10 portraits and 2 self-portraits. 10 of the pieces were made by Mosaica, which is a Montreal-based mosaicist, and then 2 were made by Magnolia Editions. And those are the Philip Glass and Lou Reed that are done in like the stoneware bisque grays. But the mosaics are done in sort of pairs that speak to, I would say, like the different periods of his art making. So you see 2 of the swirl paintings, 2 of the felt fingerprint pieces. Those are the pair of Cicely Brown and Kara Walker facing one another. And it's tumbled glass, so it's glass that's been tumbled, so it has a matte finish. And if just in the exact same way that his paintings do, if you are seeing them from a distance, you see the portrait perfectly, but then when you get up close, you just see like these big chunks or these big swirls. And it's just unbelievable to me that the mosaicists were able to replicate that in glass, because anybody who knows the way that his color theory works is it's layered, it's built up. So somehow and that was one of the projects that took a very, very long amount of time to get right, because they had to understand his color theory and then figure out how to adapt it to like a solid material. But they did it.
Thank you very much. I really love the range that you guys have worked with, and the diversity and the scale. And I really feel graffiti has come a long way. But I'd like to know, how do you finance all this? How difficult was it to get this through and continue it.
Yeah. I won't say money's never a problem, it is, but we are a percent for art program. So 1% of the project budget, now this was not true with Second Avenue, but 1% in general is up to, when your project goes over 20 million, then it goes down to 0.5%, is there for the art. And generally it's enough, it's enough. With the Second Avenue subway, it was actually 1/10 of the entire cost of the Second Avenue subway. 1/10 of 1% went into the art, which was $4 million for 4 stations. If you look at what you can get for that much money now, it's amazing what we got for each of those stations. Amazing. I will always say, the more you love the art, the less anyone ever questions why you're spending money on art. So get out there and love art and let people know you love the art, because it is the one thing our customers are happy about. And it's because of this sensitive, process that's not, just putting work up. It's very thoughtful, very connected to that place. And our customers, because you like it, it lives and thrives, and I thank you for that.
Hi, so my question is how, as Second Avenue Subway Phase 2 is going to be restarted again with congestion pricing now, how would the arts and design team have a bigger impact, or would the team have a bigger impact in designing the art and potentially have a say in reducing the cost of the station sizes? Because after all, you guys are architects and artists and would have a better sense of what should be there for the public and what should not be there.
I will say that you happen to have the person right to my left that is going to manage the art in those stations, and you have the chief architect to my right that may be able to address some of the other questions. So I'm going to defer to them.
Well, I think Linda should take this one.
Well, quite frankly, we have been looking way ahead to that. I don't think any of those plans are finalized yet. As far as I know, they've started some contracts and moving utilities around and so forth, and we're planning. But we have met with arts and design and architecture, have met, and we've looked at locations, potential locations, and we've been studying it, and so however the project shapes out in the end, as I said, a lot of decisions get made. We'll be working on with arts and design.
Yeah, I'm very excited about those stations when the time comes, but we're not nowhere near selecting artists.
But we will do the same process.
Absolutely, yeah.
Are you?
Yes.
We're tethered. Okay, other questions? Yes.
I'm just trying to remember.
Okay.
What is the maintenance process of the art in all the stations? Like, is there a cleaning or maintenance that is done? And and if at one point you have to remove a piece of art because you have to change the station, do more work, what happens to the art?
Yeah, both good questions. So as Sandra mentioned, pertaining to the funding question, we operate as a percent for art program, and that percent for art policy provides for new artwork to be commissioned, but not to be maintained. So that comes out of our very, very small operating budget. We have more, it's very small, like you wouldn't believe it. So we have to get very, very creative, but more so we have to make extremely good choices up front about the materials and locations. We cannot put things in places that we won't be able to maintain them, or materials that we don't know how they're gonna wear, because we're planning for these things to be there for decades, you know? So We have a very small team. We looked after as much as we can. We do cleaning ourselves. We do minor repairs. We commission if glass is broken. Obviously, we are able to have that reproduced. And we've been talking a lot about our partners, our architectural and design partners, but we also have an incredible stations team of personnel that we work with and facilities maintenance that we can tap into their support. Really, I mean, there's no way that like we do this on our own. We do not. So they give us a lot of cleaning, just sort of routine maintenance help. We have a cleaning plan that specifies how often things can be cleaned and what materials can be used. But to the second part of your question, what happens when the station needs changes, yeah, which happens quite often, especially I would say these last handful of years as the MTA has been heavily investing in accessibility upgrades. We're putting in a lot of new elevators, and that changes things. The station has to be reconfigured, walls get sliced through. And thankfully, again, working together, we have been able to mitigate that impact, I would say, pretty well. We have provisions in the contract that if something is removed, it has to go back in, if not in that location, because that wall doesn't exist anymore. We have to find a new place for it. We have, in our almost 40-year history, removed very, very few artworks. That is an absolute last resort.
We're afraid to propose it. Because
I'd like to-
public outcry?
Yeah, well, also, sometimes it's just a nice outcome. We don't want to change what's there, and we try to avoid as much as possible. We do try to avoid it.
I just want to add, if any of you out there have contacts to foundations or anyone, no one likes to give the MTA money. But this is always going to be a very difficult area to get funded. So if you do, it would be really a great thing if you could make those connections and pitch that this is a worthy thing, because that would multiply many times what we're able to do.
See, I think we had one more question in the back.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for all the effort and beautification of our city and giving us the grace and dignity to move through beautiful spaces on our way to work. I think it's really incredible. I know that much like there are stations that are designed in-house by MTA C&D, there's also artwork that's designed by the Arts and Design. Could you talk more about that process and how it's changed over the years and moved more towards outside artists?
So she asked if artists develop by Arts and Design in-house, and you don't.
Not really. There are a couple examples. I'm a painter, and many, many years ago, before I was a coordinator and manager, and there was a situation where a station wasn't going to have art, and I had a show up at the time, and the director turned to me and said, "What would you do here?" And I said, "I would do this and this, and I would create a work here." It was South Ferry that played off of this, And she said, "Do it." And I did it. And for many years, you could see that piece. It's now closed behind. The special tour. But it was a $20,000 project. In many ways, it was a temporary project that was sort of, and I never planned to be the director. So that was, was not in the plans. And then another situation that happened was that at the Museum of Natural History, and the museum wanted to give money, and they wanted to have art, but they wanted to improve the station, and they were going to give a significant $1 million to do this if we would fix it up. So I was asked to go and work with them and try to figure out how we would select, to do the art. So they didn't want to commit to any money if they didn't know what the art was going to be. Well, I would not do a panel that I don't have a budget, it's not budgeted to just set an artist up to be disappointed to go through all that work. And so I was on a bus coming back to the office, and I thought, what can we do? What can we do? And then I went, I'm an artist. there's a staff. We have a staff of artists. We know artists. Why don't we come up with an idea? And we did for 81st Street. And basically the idea was we had gone through where the idea came from to do this. We had gone through a visit with the museum before, like an introductory visit, and we went to the museum and we got a pretty good tour of how they have by docents and the 11 disciplines. And really we thought, and they kept saying they wanted to feel that you had arrived at the museum when you got off the train. And so that's what the idea was, to bring the museum, to experience it when you got off. And through the eyes, really, of docents that have the basic facts. And I came back and I spoke to Kendall Henry and Mona Chen. Kendall's now, of course, the Deputy Commissioner for Public Art with the city, Department of Cultural Affairs. And Kendall's also an artist, and Mona's also out of Cooper, you know. And basically, we conceived it together, how it would be. Lydia Bradshaw's here. Back then, she did research every night. All the work had to be done after our day job. And Lydia would head off to the libraries and researching. And then we expanded the team with artists to do the execution through the various aspects of it. And ultimately, they gave us, we went and did a scale model of what we would do and presented it. And to all of, you know, Neil Tyson was there, all of their scientists came in and looked, and they approved it and gave us $500,000 to execute it. And if you want to see, it's at 81st Street. No. And we're expanding on that, aren't we?
So we'll take one more question.
Cheryl's going to add one thing.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to say to further, I guess, answer that question. Those are very good examples of the oddities, the outliers of our more than 400 artworks. But all of the rest, the other 400, were artists who proposed a site-specific proposal, were commissioned for the project. So we're working with professional artists, which are many times also artists that you're seeing in galleries and having museum retrospectives. So I think I just wanted to add that as well.
These were definitely very unique situations, and that you'd had nothing. No. Okay. I think Lenny's got one.
All right, Letty.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lenny Schwendinger. I'm the lighting designer and was the lead lighting designer for the ESI project. I'm curious, really curious about this interpretation of other materials. So in other words, someone does crochet, and how that sort of middle process of interpretation I just think is so interesting. Could you talk about it?
I just want to say that from, you know, mosaics, the interpretation through mosaic happened early on because we saw that we had, that the historic mosaics where they had not been touched by man or nature were in pristine conditions. And we knew through history they would be. And we knew that you can't spend money, government money, and then 6 weeks later you've got a problem. So we went with the durable, but the big kicker was that, you know, if you started interpretation at that point, public art at that point were really public artists that worked sculpturally, three-dimensionally a lot, and very little mosaics. But it just seemed that we could open it up. There was a painting bias on this, but we could open it up to artists that worked two-dimensionally, which got us around all those issues where we have three-dimensional. There are many issues, though we do it. It's much more complicated. And so we could, and if a fabricator can interpret anything, if you have the money, and so that was the premise, that, and we taught the artist picks, we approved the fabricator, and we taught the artist that the way to pick the fabricator, the one you want, is the one when you see your work and you don't see the hand of the fabricator. And that's a good rule of thumb, that, you know, you see samples, and it's their job, the burden's on them to get the art that you're looking at interpreted. And like we just discussed Chuck, but look at Nick Cave, look at Kiki Smith. You know, you can go through Nancy Bloom all through the system. And I mean, Barbara Ellman's glass out is just exquisite. And it's, I don't see the fabricator, I see Barbara's work.
I'm just going to add that, Lenny, you will really enjoy that chapter of the book because it really takes you through that process and even includes 2 side-by-side samples so that you can see the one that was selected versus the other translation that was not because it was less true to her work.
I'll read it.
Did we still have the question in the back, or? All right, well, hopefully this evening we gave you a little bit of a taste of the overview of the program. And also, I just think it's so wonderful to hear these very understated people who clearly are moving mountains. It really is amazing what they do. And I will say that in my time, my 10 years at the MTA, there were many difficult days. It's very challenging to work in that environment. And one of the things that I would do to get my peace of mind back is I would go up to the 16th floor, which is where Arts and Design is, and I would look at the different beautiful glass samples from the different artists, the different places that the mock-ups, and it really actually would just reset my day. But really and truly, amazing, amazing work, and I am so glad that you got to capture it in this book because it gets to be shared. I would like to ask each of you what might be a takeaway for this audience. I'll start with Cheryl. Or a conclusion.
Well, okay, I mean, I guess a takeaway to this audience in particular is just, as I assume there are many architects that we either work with or will work with in the future, that there are so many details that go into the coordination of these projects, and we're always very excited to start planning and working closely on that process. And only when that happens do we get the results that we've seen here. So I think that's my takeaway, is let's start planning early.
And Linda, what about you?
Well, just in keeping with that, the MTA, we do really prioritize the art and put a great effort into this. And it's enjoyable, of course, for us, and it's great, but we are happy to see people appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a tough last 5 years, and with that everybody in the arts and really the world has felt. It's been tough, and yes, money has been a lot tighter and harder to come by. But because of teams like Linda and all the people of you here, I keep saying this, and colleagues like Cheryl and Eve, that everyone wants this to happen. And if the will is there, it happens, and it must continue. I want to just go to this panel tonight. This is one of the best panels I've enjoyed so very much, and the most incredible audience. And I want to thank Eve and Linda and Cheryl, because what a great way to celebrate a career than to sit and talk with you all, with people interested, and you're why we did it. You know, this is what drove me and my colleagues all these years. And so I want to thank you, Eve, for organizing this panel and all the care you went into telling the story. It was just well worth it and greatly appreciated. And the takeaway is the book.
And listen, that was the perfect ending. But I am going to say one thing, is it is a very momentous time for the program at MTA, but it really is important to acknowledge the work that Sandra has done. Sandra has been going on to her next chapter now. I don't know quite the right words to say it, but the amount that Sandra has given to this program is really, really impressive. And I think the opportunity for us to talk with artists and architects was really important. And I can't say enough about all that you've given, inspired, and your graciousness. You know, she wanted every artist in that book. As you heard tonight, she acknowledges her team, and I think that's why she gets such great results. So I would just like to raise a microphone and